Well, obviously they agreed because I have been to services. I've been to services which are wonderful, and I have been to funeral services where you go directly from this beautiful temple, Bethel, and then everybody strolls to the mausoleum where you do another prayer. And you're right, so people don't have to go a half hour to a cemetery. Everything is done right there and done beautifully. However, there are many Jews that believe that you do not be buried in a mausoleum, that you must be buried underground.
Right.
So when you mentioned there were challenges within your congregation to do this, that was probably one of the issues. So how do you deal with that?
Well, we've dealt with it very directly in that the original burial in Israel, when it was Canaan, was in biblical times and post-biblical times, was cave burial. It was not underground burial. That came later, when we moved. Our people moved out of Canaan, out of the Promised Land. So what it was is the people were put in a sarcophagi, and then their bones were then placed in the cave. So what I'm saying is that the mausoleum is an artificial cave. It's built with natural cement, is sand and water and whatever else goes into making cement. And so what we've done, we've created a cave, but that is out of modern material. So in some ways we've gone back to the original state of burial, though I have to acknowledge that does not follow the letter of Jewish law. And though in building the mausoleum we followed it as close as we could, because the idea of having a cemetery on synagogue grounds was very common in Europe. I've visited several synagogues where there are cemeteries to this day. So we follow that part of halakha, Jewish law, but the spirit of the law is for us is observed, but not by traditional conservative Orthodox Jews, and I respect that.
Okay, interesting. I've never thought of it as a cave before, and how you talk about going back way with the way Jews were born. So you mentioned Orthodox. So for people, your Temple Bethel is Reformed. So just give us in a nutshell the difference between Jewish religion of Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox.
Okay. Let me use the experience at Mount Sinai, Moses at Mount Sinai, as the paradigm for the differences. Orthodox believe that Moses received the laws, the Jewish law, from God on Mount Sinai, and that God literally transmitted this information through Moses, but it did not involve any of Moses' human faculties and frailties. So the law, letter for letter, word for word, is divine, which means the Bible, the Torah, the 600, not just the 10, but the 613 laws that are mitzvot that are listed in the Torah are literally from God and must be observed as best as humanly possible, at least as explained in the official guidebooks, the Talmud, in Jewish history and Jewish tradition. That's orthodoxy. Conservative Judaism sees God God on Mount Sinai giving this to Moses. Moses writing it down. Now, as a human being, some of the laws are written down to be as God said them. Some are as Moses interpreted them. So there's room for, in conservative Judaism, there's room to interpret the law and modify it. And to go to Reform says it was not just given to Moses at Mount Sinai. The law is given historically through the generations of our people, and it is up to us to individually and community-wise subject the law to our understanding, and then be free to choose how to observe the spirit, if not the letter of the law. So that in a nutshell is Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform.
Okay, I got it. And you know what? I'm still confused. But however, on a lighter note, so let's talk about, you're the spiritual leader, you're the mentor, you're a teacher. So you've teach in the Sunday school. I know you've taught at FAU. But also in the Sunday school at Temple Bethel, you teach or taught sex education. And your son was in one of the classes, and I understand very embarrassed. So how did you lose a lot of privacy when you are a rabbi and the rabbi's wife? You're a very public person. And here you are teaching sex education and your son's there. So how did you deal with that?
Well, let me start off with that, and Myra probably can pick up on it better than I can. Why I put that into the curriculum of the confirmation class, actually I and my educator, Robin Eisenberg, did that. Because at that point in the schools, very little was being done in the area of sex education, at least not soon enough. And so even at age 15, the schools were holding back in what can be taught. In fact, some of the traditional Christian religious community was part of the problem at that point. So we put it into the confirmation curriculum, and I worked with Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood actually helped guide and direct me in this education program. But our sons it was difficult for the sons to be in the classes that have their father as a rabbi teaching this.
Right. When you mention your sons, I want to backtrack for a minute, because when you have 4 sons and a lot of grandchildren, but you had 4 children, 4 sons, in 5.5 years. Mm-hmm. So, Myra, how did you deal with that?
We felt so lucky.
Oh, interesting.
We felt
so where were the boys born?
2 of them were born in the Washington, D.C. area, and 2 in the Philadelphia area.
So when you came to Boca Raton, young
4.
rabbi family, you had 4 children.
Right.
Okay, and you seem to make it so easy. 4 children, 5.5 years?
It was very noisy.
Okay. Noisy is the only way you would say, well, you are a remarkable woman. I've said that before, but and you have 4 remarkable sons, all doing well. And Essa, how many grandchildren?
10.
10. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, so your children have made a big impact on your life. I know you for them, aside from sex education. So I mentioned losing privacy. Has that affected you as a rabbi and rabbi's wife here in Boca Raton?
I have not personally felt it. So much philosophy. My approach to the rabbinate has been one of sharing openly, freely, all of my life, my strengths, my weaknesses, and what we do as a family has been important to me, and has become important to the congregation. When the boys were growing up, and they would say to me, particularly when they were in college, "Dad, we want you to be at Parents Weekend." And if I had a bar mitzvah or something special going on, I generally would go to the family and say, "My son has asked me to be with him this weekend," and I'm saying yes. And I would do that with the idea of setting myself up as a model for what they should do when their children are in college. That your family comes first. There are times when your family can't come first, and there's a death, and we've had family trips and vacations that had to be postponed. But fortunately, it's been rare, and though significant.
Though our kids did have reacted to that.
Yeah.
Recently, there was a situation where one of our sons had to postpone a trip for his family because of work. And he said...
And his work is what?
He travels overseas buying and selling companies. He does global business development. And he was going to take his children to Chicago, and instead he needed to be in Taiwan the next day. And he said to us, he never wanted to become that person that had to postpone things that were important to the family, like his father had to a few times. And it was a painful time, for us thinking about it. And for him, facing the reality that life isn't always the way you want it to be.
Interesting.
And sometimes you have to have, give disappointments.
Right. As you grow up, and although none of us are getting older, but once you get a little bit older, you realize some of the things that you learned way, way back that you didn't understand. You understand today. So, Rabbi, being the spiritual leader, being a rabbi, having an influence on so many people, what has been the most rewarding for you?
I guess the most rewarding would be people who come up to me today and remind me of things that I said to them that had a significant impact on their life and help them through a difficult time. To me, interesting enough, almost every time this happens, I do recall the incident in the moment. And it was a moment, for me at that time, it was a moment like any other moment. It was not something that was significant. It was something I expected. I would expect any rabbi to do, and to respond to the individual's request, and to find out today that what I did and said then had a lasting effect on their life. Gives me an opportunity to say it's been great being a rabbi.
And as a rabbi, what's the most difficult?
Most difficult is probably the politics of the rabbinate, which fortunately and unfortunately, I find my Christian colleagues have the same situation. So we're no different than any other religious group. But it's the toxic personality that you have to deal with that needs to turn every situation into a contest and feel that their way is to be the way that has to come out on top. And honestly speaking, I'm really not a confrontive personality. Some people like the challenge of a fight. I don't. So what I've done is I make sure before I go into a board meeting, I have many allies. So there are times that I may not even have to speak up. But the job gets done.
And you have people in your corner. So have you ever doubted your faith?
Doubted my faith? Mm-hmm. Belief in God?
Right, well.
The answer is absolutely yes. Mm-hmm. When I was ordained, it was the time of the death of God theology in the 1960s. And the president of the college at that time was Nelson Glick, of blessed memory. And he was very upset that one of his graduates, Sherwin Wine in Birmingham, Michigan, was in Time magazine denying the belief in God. And so he threatened at the time of our ordination to ask each of us if we believed in God, which is something that is not part of Jewish practice. We, as a class, all agreed that if he asked the question, we were going to say no. And at that time, I honestly had very serious theological questions and doubts. And as I like to tell the story, he never asked the question, thank God, and we never had to answer it. But when I started out in the rabbinate, I would say I was not necessarily a non-believer, but with Judaism there's a term called the epikoros, the doubter. The serious doubter, and in Judaism, the serious doubter is given a place of honor and respect, because in Judaism there is no requirement, unlike Christianity, to believe in God. In fact, the rabbis, the tradition goes so far that in the Talmud they wrote in a dialogue with God where God says to the people, "Would that my people not believe in me but follow my commandments." So as a Jew, it's more important to do the commandments as much as you can to identify as a Jew, practice Judaism, and be involved in social change and commitment and action. That's more important than what you believe.